Some of you have already begun to ask about how to make better arguments. So I thought I would spend some time today talking through conceptually what an argument is, what makes it good, and then illustrating some of those ideas using some concrete examples. So arguments are essential. I've said that before. But one thing to think about is that arguments can be at different levels and be nested inside each other. And arguments are convincing only when they're backed by appropriate evidence. So what is an argument in the first place? An argument is nothing more, but also very importantly, nothing less than a claim which is not necessarily true. And all arguments use an explicit logic combined with data as evidence to convince the reader that the claim they're making is true. They don't simply leap to a conclusion and expect that the reader can follow along. So good arguments are not necessarily true, they're focused, they're not ambivalent, and they're integrated with their logical framework. And I'm going to explain each one of these aspects of a good argument by illustrating it with an example. So first up, not necessarily true. That sentence that you see on screen is a kind of argument. Apple is one of the most profitable companies in the Fortune 500. The problem is, it's very hard for someone who knows anything about Apple or the Fortune 500 to disagree with that. So this is almost in the status of being necessarily true. How can you change a sentence like this, a nascent argument like this, and refine it so that it becomes, as we call it, arguable? One way to do it is by something like this, right? So you can expand that first sentence into something longer and more detailed, which explains a little bit about your thinking in support of the claim that you're making that Apple is one of the most profitable companies in the Fortune 500. So Apple's profitability in the last 5 years, not for all time, but in the last 5 years, you claim is due to its ability to win market share and loyalty among ultra premium consumers of personal electronics who are able to pay a high premium for high quality products. And in turn, this is because of what they have done, right? They have committed to premium industrial design, and they've invested in advanced production facilities and logistics infrastructure. The claim that you're making is that Apple is profitable, especially in the last 5 years, but you're actually expanding that claim and making it arguable, because people could look at this statement and disagree with it, and they might say, for instance, that Apple is profitable because of its relationships with cellular networks to resell its products in addition to like cell phone contracts, and they make a lot of money from that too. So the fact that you can create a statement that is more precise, that creates the possibility for someone else to look at it and say, I have an alternative argument in support of or against your claim. This is a good thing, not a bad thing. To be effective, arguments must be focused. And that sentence up there, Unilever's product strategy is very successful, is not very focused because Unilever is a really large company with lots and lots of products. And can we say that all of its products are equally very successful? We don't know. This statement is not yet focused enough. Now, if you expanded again this statement, you might get something which is more focused. You might focus it in one particular part of its product strategy, its consumer product strategy. You might focus it in one geography, such as India, and in a time period, the last 5 years. And then once you've done that, once you've narrowed down not all of Unilever's products, but just the consumer products, not all of Unilever all over the world, but just in India, and not Unilever for all time, but just in the last 5 years, you can then make a claim about why Unilever's consumer product strategy in India in the last 5 years has been successful. It's because it's focused exclusively on developing and marketing products for the rapidly growing suburban lower middle class demographic. Again, notice that this statement is much more focused. You're not talking about all of Unilever everywhere, all products, all time. You're talking about part of Unilever's products in one country over a short period of time. And you have then been able to focus down and come up with a reason for it to have been successful that is in itself arguable. It is not necessarily true. People could look at this statement and they might object. And again, the fact that someone can look at your statement, your argument, and say, I have an alternative suggestion is a good thing. And that's a good test for whether or not an argument is arguable, whether it's not necessarily true. Next, not ambivalent. What is the problem with the statement up here? The problem is this. It says, while Pret a Manger's success may be due to one thing, efficient internal human resource management processes, and smart raw material sourcing, it is also possible that this same success has been driven by high and growing urban demand for fast and inexpensive healthy meals. Now, it's true that both of these things may be true. Your job as someone creating an argument is to choose a side and then argue for that side. The second statement is not ambivalent. The author makes it clear that there is a trend, urban demand for fast, inexpensive, and consistent healthy meals, which is growing rapidly, but also makes it clear that he or she is not claiming that that trend is the cause for Pret a Manger's success. The main driver, he or she claims, for Pret a Manger's success in capturing market share in major cities is its ability to open many new locations in a short time while keeping quality high. And in turn, what causes this ability? It's efficient internal human resource processes and smart raw material sourcing. To make a good argument, you need to make your argument focused, open to debate, which means someone can look at the same statement and think, I don't necessarily agree. You need to choose a side, and then you need to make your logic explicit. So let's look again at some not so great arguments and workshop them, or see how we can workshop them to make them better. So up here, this argument is not so great. Tesco is a UK-based supermarket retailer. It is exposed to uncertainty due to Brexit. This uncertainty is expected to increase. This case study analyzes how Tesco is changing its product mix and supply chain to deal with the uncertainty resulting from Brexit. Where is the argument here? Are any of these statements arguable at all? This version is slightly better. In this version, it now becomes maybe a little bit clearer why the author claims that Tesco might be especially susceptible to Brexit uncertainty. And the reason for that is threefold, and they're related. One, much of its product range is sourced from outside the UK. Two, therefore, it's susceptible to increases in its cost of goods sold because of currency fluctuations. And three, it cannot actually pass on cost increases to its customers easily because they're highly price sensitive. Now, this first part, this is the setup. The author here is arguing that this is the reason why Tesco is exposed to Brexit uncertainty. The second part of it, that Tesco is changing its product mix and supply chain to increase the emphasis on UK sourcing, is the author's explanation of how Tesco is responding strategically to this Brexit uncertainty risk. How do we make it better still? The way the author now has made this third version better than the second version is by organizing the presentation of facts and connecting up the facts so that it is easier for the reader to follow the thread of what the author claims is the reason why Tesco is susceptible to Brexit uncertainty. Notice that many of the same ideas are there, but now when you read through it as a reader, you see the connections. And it's mostly from connecting words such as because and while. So that sentence there, the second sentence in there, because much of its product range is sourced outside the UK, Tesco is susceptible to increases in its cost of goods sold due to currency fluctuations. That's a cause-effect statement, right? Now, after that, that has a knock-on effect. Tesco does not have the capacity to raise prices easily because its consumers are highly price sensitive. So the fact that Tesco has exposure to increases that are unpredictable in its cost of goods sold is a problem for Tesco because it can't just pass those prices on. That second sentence now captures the entire argument about the problem in one sentence versus 2 or 3 sentences before. And the final 2 sentences explain what the author is trying to claim is his or her idea of how Tesco is responding to this threat. Now, how do you make it even better still? You've already improved that sentence which explains that nexus of causes that leads to Tesco being susceptible to Brexit uncertainty. Who should read this Tesco case? Not only people who are interested in Tesco, but this case offers insights for retailers in any sector selling to price-sensitive consumers or whose supply chains expose them adversely to currency fluctuation. The meta-argument, if you will, here is that by reading this case about Tesco, anyone who is in a similar situation to Tesco, they have price-sensitive consumers, or if their supply chains expose them to currency fluctuation risk, they might learn something from what Tesco has done that can help them do something better. This is what we mean by generalizability. In order to generalize what you find out in a case, you have to first ask yourself, what is it a case of? The Tesco case is a case obviously about Tesco, but if you zoom out a little bit, it might be a case about how supermarkets can deal with, for instance, currency fluctuation risk if they have very price sensitive consumers. If you zoom out again, it might be how a retailer can deal with currency fluctuation risk if they have price sensitive consumers. So if you keep zooming out, always bearing in mind what this is a case of, you might be able to think about who else might be interested in your case and be able to explain to them why might they be interested in your case. And in order to do all of those things, you also need to answer the question, why is your case a good one for studying that interesting thing? What makes your case the one that you pick for your final assignment? Something which is especially suited, especially appropriate for investigating the particular problems that you think it is a case of, so that you can explain to other people who might be interested why they might be interested in it. All right, so with that, I hope that was slightly clarifying about how to think about what arguments are and how to make better ones, both in the context of your written assignment and also generally when you're writing things that are meant to persuade people to do what you want them to do.